peace and human rights in today's world, and I'm a student of the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies and student of Stuart, Rees, so of course what I've got written down here is peace with justice. What I find really frustrating is if a media commentator or someone's doing an article and they might contact me to ask for a comment about Iraq, whenever I give them an answer, it's like that. It's a bigger context, it's going into history, it's learning from history, it's dealing with... They went, no. But tell me, what would you do? Now, how, you know, they don't want to look and learn from history and see the bigger picture. So instead they get people like Major General Jim Molan on the Sky TV ad nauseum because he's got a uniform and he's got a fancy title and he's an official, and he gives an answer which is short-sighted, immediate and dramatic. And that's exactly the way our narrative is being shaped, because the sort of answers I would give would be quite inconvenient because it would point the finger, of course, back at us. And the answer may go something along the lines of this little piece of prose that I received during the week that many of you may have also received in an email. We support the Iraqi government in the fight against ISIS. We don't like ISIS, but ISIS is supported by Saudi Arabia, who we do like. We don't like Assad in Syria. We support the fight against him, but ISIS is also fighting against him. We don't like Iran, but Iran supports the Iraqi government in its fight against ISIS. So some of our friends support our enemies, and some enemies are now our friends. And some of our enemies are fighting against our other enemies who we want to lose. But we don't want our enemies who are fighting our enemies to win. If the people we want to defeat are defeated, they could be replaced by people we like even less. And all this was started by us invading a country to drive out terrorists who were not actually there until we went in to drive them out.
Did you write that?
I certainly can't claim credit for that, and I'm sure maybe some of you saw that during the week being passed around. But look, it's time. It's so frustrating when the media and some of the collective discussions we have don't give us the opportunity for a very wise and insightful reflection. I'm wearing a t-shirt which says "Stop the next war now," and I've been wearing it for 10 years. Now, the message didn't get through, obviously, but 10 years ago, did we not predict that this was a possible outcome? Yes, we did. Why doesn't anybody listen to us? You know, we've studied history. We have at the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies, we're students of non-violence, and we have other ways. We point to other ways. And to not learn from history and take the time to have these points of reflection and discussion is very dangerous. And so when people want me to give an answer like, oh, what should we do now to stop people beheading others? I'm like, is that the right question? You know, why not ask the right questions that are really going to be transformative questions, redemptive, transformative questions? And the reason why we're not asking those transformative questions is because they are uncomfortable, they are awkward, and they implicate us. And that's why we are not going anywhere near those questions. And of course, those questions, as students of non-violence, we ask about, and when it comes to situations like this, who benefits, who is funding, who is supplying weapons, who is enabling and supporting perpetrators of violence. Now that's awkward, because if we say that the threat in our world today is a group like ISIS, and just personally, I don't consider that group to be the major source of danger and violence in the world today. I believe there are governments around the world that are far more frightening than that particular group. But if we ask who is enabling, funding, etc., well, the fact is it's our allies. If we do want to focus on this particular group, such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar and places like that, are we putting the hard word on these places, these countries? Are we having discussions? I don't think that that's happening because there are diplomatic issues, there's issues of trade, etc., etc. So why there's not an outcry and a greater scrutiny of who is enabling these groups is just beyond me. For me, that it's quite a basic place to start, really basic place to start, especially if you want an immediate response, an immediate reaction to what's going on now. But of course, in the bigger picture, then we would look at the issue of peace with justice, or what we call in peace and conflict studies theory, positive peace. We have a positive peace or negative peace. And when I was in Iraq after 2003, I was there in 2004, then in 2012, and I was there last year. It was rarely a period, though, of more than a couple of months that there wasn't regular acts of violence throughout Iraq. But I take as an example the city of Fallujah, of which I have a particular interest in. And I returned to Fallujah, and since the attacks on that city, of which we'll have the 10-year anniversary in November, there's not a day where the people in that community could say they experienced a day of what we would call positive peace, and that is not just an absence of violence but the presence of justice. That's because after the attacks in 2004, the city was cordoned off. It became a prison camp. You weren't allowed in or out without having your retina scanned and being interrogated as you went in and out. Probably took about 2 years before many members of the community actually were courageous enough to go back. And it suffered a lot of discrimination, of course, acts of violence from the Iraqi government, and the health issue is a whole other story. The fact that the toxic remnants of war have affected the health of the community. I did my master's thesis on the topic of Fallujah, and I argued that it was a case of herbicide, the killing of a city, and I compared it to the ancient sacking of a city where you ride away and there's nothing but smoke and ashes remaining. And I had to look into antiquity to find a comparison with Fallujah, and it was Rome's sacking of Carthage. That was the most relevant comparison, and that's because of the mythology of the salting of the earth, or leaving the place toxic, never to rise again, which is what's happened with Fallujah. So I don't think that it's a coincidence that Fallujah is central and key to the situation in Iraq today. And some people might blame Fallujah for some circumstances, but those of us who know Fallujah well also realise that the key to Iraq emerging from this in any kind of stable way or form, the key is Fallujah, with the Sunni tribal leaders there who cringe and don't want anything to do with an extremist religion. We know Iraq always had a moderate form of Islam. The Wahhabi sect never gained ground in Iraq under Saddam. Of course, it never could, it never did. And so they find that they consider it a very foreign ideology. And when I was in Fallujah last year in Ramadi, I experienced one of the most amazing acts of non-violent resistance I've ever seen in my life. I stood on the highway. It was blocked between Jordan and Baghdad, and a whole area was taken over. There was about 250,000, 250,000 people here on this Friday, non-violently protesting the actions of the Maliki government, the discrimination, the random violence. There was they had a policy of coming for the men who they were targeting, and if the men weren't home, they would arrest the wives or the sisters and put them into prison. And these arbitrary arrests, no form of justice, etc., etc. And so they non-violently presented their case. It was a log of claims that they made to the Maliki regime. And they went, I don't even know that you heard about this much here, but it was such an amazing, profound, inspiring movement of non-violence supported by Iraqis all over the country, and they refused to pick up arms. To see that was rejected in such a dramatic way was so disappointing. And of course, when it was rejected and they sent the army in to dismantle that camp, we knew what would happen next. And of course, there was a vacuum that this foreign group was able to then come in to fill. So I mean, who's not surprised by that? And so I would say that, we need to ask the right questions, the questions that are going to be transformative, not these short-term, narrow, immediate questions that the media demands that we focus on. The other thing, just points I'd like to make, is about the Australia's involvement. and that is, I can't believe that we're in a situation now where, after learning the lesson, or not learning the lesson of 10 years ago, that we've had one man still has the power to make a decision to take our country to war. The most important decision a nation will ever make is a decision to go to war with another nation, and this is still in the hands of one man or the cabinet. Now, there's not many democracies around the world where that is the case, and so we have an opportunity, because the Labor Party is silent on this. We have an opportunity to lead that debate, and I'm part of a group called the Campaign for Iraq War Inquiry. We focus on this issue, and Malcolm Fraser is our patron, and so I believe this really is an opportunity to change that, and to really focus on reframing the debate in terms of, and I know some people out there may think about this debate in terms of what's in our interest, and I think for us to go out there in the reckless way that we are, very similar to 2003, that certainly isn't in Australia's interest. It wasn't in Australia's interest to go to war in 2003. It certainly isn't in Australia's interest to go to another war to try to respond to the chaos created by the first war. And I really do believe that there is that gap in the debate, because the Labor Party is silent, and that we have an opportunity to really influence and lead that debate.